And welcome back. Thank you for staying with us on Citizen Extra. We're taking you live where news is breaking very shortly. We'll be taking you straight to Kericho and to Bomet. Raila Odinga, who's the NASA presidential candidate, will be campaigning in Bomet in particular. In Kericho, he's attending a burial there, and Sam Ogena is on the campaign trail. He'll be reporting for us shortly. Jackie Maribe is following President Uhuru Kenyatta, who will be campaigning in Kajiado today, and will be giving you an update on the same very shortly. But first, let me introduce two new guests we have in studio this hour, Michael Agwanda and John Kagushia, is that correct, sir? Okay, both political analysts and are joining us this morning, and you're welcome to the program. This hour we're talking about campaign rhetoric. Is it lining up with what both parties have promised in their manifestos? But speaking of manifestos, it appears that NASA finds itself in a bit of a conundrum this morning with two manifestos in place, and anybody who watched Monday's special will know that we had on the show NASA's technical advisor, who then claimed that part of the manifestos we were showing were not in fact NASA's. But today a report in one of the dailies indicates that in fact there are two that are being propagated by the NASA team. So which is which? I will start this conversation with you, Michael. What's going on within NASA, do you think, and how injurious is it that the team has two different documents? Thank you.
I know the information out there that there are two documents and belonging to NASA, and in fact one of their senior strategists is saying that they want to disown one of the manifestos, but I think it was yesterday when the former Prime Minister came out very clearly and said both are their documents. One is actually supplementing the other in terms of details, in terms of implementation strategy, in terms of finer stuff that are needed in the other one. And the difference here is perhaps the color. We have one which is green, we have one which is blue, but what they're saying is basically that this thing is one document, perhaps prepared by different people, as Mr. Ndii, the economist, was Dr. Ndii, the economist, was saying previously in another media.
No, Dr. Ndii categorically said that that is not their document. Categorically.
Well, he might have said that, but I can tell you that in NASA, perhaps what we're seeing here is a situation where, if he did not prepare it, he cannot say that definitely it is not NASA's document, because it was prepared by NASA, and actually it was a document that was launched. And so if it was launched, I strongly believe that the principles that were launching this were behind it and adopted it as a document of NASA. I will not go into the nitty-gritties of whether it is their document or not. I will go by what the former Prime Minister said, who is now the presidential...
Michael, surely whether it is their document or not is not a nitty-gritty. That is the heart of the question. Is it yours?
Mike, can you give a direction?
I mean, come on. Let's not be economical here.
Well, I'm not trying to be economical. I'm just saying
cheeky.
that I think so far where we are is they've agreed.
Is it your document? Is it not? That is not a nitty-gritty.
It is the document. The former Prime Minister said they all supplement one another and they will use both. Dr. Ndii might be having his own issues, but I can tell you that this document belongs to NASA.
And I must congratulate my good friend here for bringing comic relief to the studio.
Comic relief?
Yes, because I think he's trying to be a comedian. But the reality of the matter is this: as far as communication goes, you've got to always kiss your communication. It says keep it simple. Okay, so the simplicity is this: you cannot have two documents and claim them to be a manifesto. That's one. And I think what has happened is a classic NASA faux pas, where they have two different think tanks that came up with two different documents, and then one leaked the other and the other one was launched, and now they are in a place where to keep all their their strategists happy. They're trying to perpetuate both documents at the same time. Now, that's a difficult place to play, because I, as an analyst, I'm sitting here and wondering, okay, so which document am I debating? Now, as far as communication is concerned, what NASA needs to do, let me not say you guys, I don't know which side you're on, but what NASA needs to do is they need to come up with a harmonized strategy and a harmonized...
If you're referring to Michael, we know which side he's on, because he actually ran during the primaries.
Okay. All right.
ODM ticket. So
so that explains. So don't defend the indefensible. You know, let's not play Trump-like politics where we create alternative facts to the truth. I think there were two documents that were prepared, and which was going to be the final one was kept secret, and one side felt disenfranchised, and they released that. But that's not an issue. As far as communications is concerned, harmonize these documents, turn it, spin it, and say that we have a harmonized document. Rein in D and the rest who are saying that this is not our document, and then move on. I think denying will only make for good humor by denying what happened on TV.
Yeah, and Mike is mischievous.
I'm glad you saw him. At least one person thought it was funny.
Yeah, Mike is getting mischievous here. But the good thing that we are all agreeing, there is an overrider and there is a gray area between the two documents that they have. Actually, I've been studying the two manifestos, and when it comes to NASA, actually, I would want to get Mike to really identify and tell me which one to read, because sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. So I think they need to come back, and Mike needs to go back and tell them, listen, we have two documents out there, we need to harmonize them, and sometimes discrepancies are there. Anomalies do arise, and we don't want to bash them that much. But they have to come clear, because if they do not do then this thing can also really bring, because this is the pivot through which their policies and strategies are being enshrined and beamed on Kenyans. So the point whereby we are having debate, and you will tell us that, you see, that's not our document, that's the right one, that's the wrong one, then it's really hurting the camp. And I think Mike has to go back and tell them to fix that.
Well, I think before Mike maybe puts his word, it was clear on Sunday, and when you were with Dr. Ndi, and you brought about the issue of national pipeline. Yeah. And it was clear he said, no, that is not in our manifesto. Yet, it was on the other manifesto. So it is clear that these two manifestos actually do not carry the same content. They are very different fundamentally, especially on the issues that they are propagating. And now, I'm not surprised about this. If you look at the document that was launched at Racecourse, it had very obvious spelling mistakes, even on the first page. If you look at the first page, actually, it was talking about mambo ya badilikia. And of course, you know, the other one was saying mambo ya badilika. So it was clear that there are two competing interests. But again, and you wouldn't be surprised, because if you look at the way NASA now is conducting its business, there's a lot of competition, internal competition that is coming in between the two, the different parties that have come together. Look at someone like Mudama, who says that I am not going to support Kalonzo because of certain reasons. But again, he is the one who is heading campaign for Raila Odinga. If you look at the way things are happening, like in Bungoma, you find campaigns for the ODM candidates and the campaign for the Ford Kenya candidates. They are taking a very different and divergent angle. If you look at Kakamega again, you look at what is happening with Boni Halole and Oparanya. Again, you see there's a lot of competing internal interests. And I think this has to do with the kind of coalition that has come together, and the committee that had been put together to bring together these parties and to harmonize, which was led by Mudama and Orengo. I think they are not doing a good job so far, because they do not seem to be bringing their troops together. And then, of course, this now raises very fundamental questions as to how this coalition then would govern the country if they were to take in power in August this year.
Michael, I think you deserve
I deserve a battle here. One of the things I want to make very clear to my colleagues is I'm not holding brief for NASA. I'm looking at these two documents and I'm saying, look, there's an individual that was involved in architecturing one document, and there's an individual that was not involved in architecturing the second document. He was brought here and he needed to explain the document that he knew better. In this case, we are realizing that these are
not the document that he knew better, Michael. He needed to come here
Mike,
and
the simple thing is,
the NASA manifesto.
The simple thing, Mike, is why don't they kill the wrong document?
No, they
Why don't they just
it.
cancel out the wrong document?
I think that's what the former Prime Minister said, that actually those documents, both documents belong to them. I agree with all of us that they need to harmonize this document into one document. The reason why I say this, and as you've also said it, that if we were going to look for a document that will drive this country to the next government, and if we were going to look for a document that we would be able to rely on and actually hold NASA as a party now, and perhaps even being the next government, if we were to hold them accountable on the basis of the document they prepared in the name of manifesto, it needs to be one. If there are two, it is hurting their
Totally. And you know, this plays into a story. It's an apocryphal story, so I have no evidence of it. Raila's way of doing strategy is to have 3-4 different strategies, to come up with 3-4 different strategies and tell all of them that yours is the strategy. And I think Mr. Dr. Ndii, suffered an ego punch when he was on your show, and I think he responded not from a party position but from an individual heart ego position, where how come it's not my document that's being discussed. And I think that plays into the fact that I think NASA really needs to rein in their egos, because whenever you're in a coalition, you've got to decide that I have got to put party over self, coalition over self, and that's what needs to happen. They need to really sacrifice their egos and find a common ground as quickly as possible, because if they do not do that, it will be even more difficult to run this country, because there's one fundamental thing that I've been very curious about in their manifesto. Now I don't know which one I'm talking about, but in one, I think the blue one, you know, the blue one, green one, you know. So one of them, in one of them, Raila, who's running for presidency, will institute a constitutional referendum to remove power from the presidency to create an executive prime minister. You know, that means that the president will be in opposition to himself, if you think about it critically, because I get into office to campaign myself out of office. So there are lots of things about the manifesto that we need to query, and they need to begin to toe the same line as quickly as possible.
All right, let's move the conversation forward. Beyond, let's suppose that NASA will manage to harmonize the two documents. Then going forward, how do these documents line up with what we've heard on the campaign trail? Let's start with NASA. What's your own assessment of the same, Ray? Are they preaching water, drinking wine, or do you see some synergy in terms of what we hear the candidates say and what is in the two documents?
I think, Anne, what I'm seeing NASA doing, NASA has gone to the basics in terms of rallying their strategies around the basic concept. And the basic concept here, what I mean is some of the challenges that the country is going through, and you've really seen what they've really been hampering on is in terms of unga, cost of commodities, and ease of doing business. Talking about, you've had the former Prime Minister talking about Barclays closing shops, Tancha to Chumi, and we've been having all that, and that is an economic reality, that there's a meltdown to an extent. And NASA is going there, and I think what I've not seen in terms of their manifesto is the ambitious infrastructural intent that they have in their document, but rather they also now go to a point of social justice, looking at ethical issues and looking at how do they delve into fighting corruption and bringing equality and that. So that is what I'm seeing in terms of their campaign. I think they're going right in terms of trying to measure on what Kenyans are going through. But now, where I have a problem then, Anne, is we have Kenyans who read, we have mass literacy, we have a majority of Kenyans who are illiterate, semi-illiterate. And the majority of the Kenyans, the minority that can read, Anne, they may not translate to what NASA is saying on the ground. And if you have different manifestos that we don't know, which one are you going to do? And I also know from what we are seeing that, again, manifestos may be the two big people. It may be Uhuru Kenyatta is the main manifesto, and Raila may also be the main manifesto. But at the end of the day, we also need a blueprint through which we can really put you accountable, and you can also entice the enlightened to really know that this is where the country is going, because that direction is key. But in terms of their messaging, I hope they become consistent. But in terms of their camp, Anne, they do not only need to harmonize their documents, but even they also need to harmonize their internal structure. There's a lot of still bickering, and I think maybe the challenge that they have is that they've not still seamlessly brought up all these principles and their parties and their organs and their structures together. No wonder you may be thinking about maybe a manifesto is coming from one secretariat and the other one may be coming from another secretariat. So I think they also need to harmonize their internal dimensions and organogram, so that that can also really help, so that we don't see a lot of division. And we've had, I think Mark or Gabriel, who was saying that, I think Kagushia, about Mudama saying, I don't support Kalonzo Musyoka, but I support Raila Odinga. And that becomes really confusing.
It's time to get
one message. It does. Because then you are saying, this is a principle, this is a running mate. How do you support the presidential candidate and you don't support the running mate? And you go in public, I know there could be differences, but then why don't they manage them internally? So I think they also need to suppress and manage their house in order.
Having said that, though, John, with what we've seen in the two documents, I believe one is more aspirational and policy-based, if you like. Another tries to go into more detail in terms of the projects that NASA would roll out. Is there coherence, at least with what we hear the candidates saying on the campaign trail?
And one of the things you realize fundamentally, there's a difference between the NASA manifesto and the Jubilee manifesto, basically because, you know, Jubilee is in power, and they're looking at some of the projects they have already started and the ones that they are doing. And so when they're looking at the manifesto, they're looking at a continuation of some of those projects, and of course infusing new energy and new changes in terms of how they have managed some of the projects. Now, one of the things I would have expected to see from Jubilee manifesto, which I can say is not very clear, is that when the president was doing his State of the Nation address, one of the things he said is that only 2% of Kenyans are actually taking most of the monies that the government collects, and they're the ones who are paid huge salaries, and of course you would have expected to see this now kind of being taken care of in the manifesto, in the Jubilee manifesto, so that we see, are we now going to review the constitution so that then we can relook at the issue of over-representation in Kenya? Are we going to reduce the number of or the amounts even that we are paying to the highest paid civil servants and public servants like politicians? You know, that is one of the things I would have wished to see coming a little bit more clearly. Now, the other issue that I also noticed is that the NASA principal Raila Odinga has consistently talked about some of the issues they would want to do, especially to bring down the corruption. But again, in the manifesto that they launched, it was not also clear how they want to deal with this issue of corruption. Now, there are some paradox that, if you look, a paradox of sorts especially in the NASA manifesto. If you look at the issue of lowering the payee, which is one of the main source of government revenue, and then you look at the issue of giving free secondary education, and they are not clear whether this free secondary education is going to also have accommodation in it. The Jubilee manifesto was clear that it's only for the school tuition fee that is going to be free. Now, in this case, if you look at all that and look at the many freebies and the social support systems that the NASA is proposing to put in place, and then they also say that they're also going to bring down the cost of, they're going to bring down the money which you're borrowing from the foreign donors, you now start wondering, how are we then going to manage to run the economy if you have to continue also with the robust infrastructural development that they are proposing in the manifesto? Because if you lower the tax, then you also give a lot of money through social support systems, and then again you lower the level of borrowing from foreign donors, then how will you support the infrastructural development? And it's also not very clear how you're going to tackle the issue of corruption, because if you look at the issue of them saying that we are going to be avoiding the issue of having public servants having an interest, a conflict of interest in terms of the work or the tenders that are being given by government or the government business. Again, you ask yourself, is it happening in Jubilee era? And of course, you can tell very clearly that the law does not allow that. And even one actually had a conflict of interest, they can actually be taken to court. But it's clear for all of us that these issues of corruption do not happen because of very, very clear conflict of interest. It's usually through proxies in a way that at times it's very difficult for you to decipher or to even bring forward. So it is clear that there is more that needs to be done, especially when it comes to the issue of giving teeth to some of these commissions, the independent commissions like EACC. I would have expected to see very, very clear proposals.
I mean, I hear where you're going with this, John, and it's unfortunate that we did not get, specific answers to those questions posed on Monday. But I think in as far as what you're talking about in terms of supporting the projects, we did see in at least one of the manifestos, very clearly saying that, they were going to move to people-based infrastructure, and perhaps that terminology, if explored, may contain the answer, that we may not see the kind of mega projects that perhaps Jubilee has envisioned, but monies would be spent towards, things that give direct services to the people. That is an assumption at best on my part. But Michael, let me come to you. Do you believe that both documents in their entirety are lining up with what we're hearing the candidates saying on the campaign trail? We're focusing on NASA.
Thanks, Sam. Let me give you an analysis of what I've perhaps seen in the campaign trail that, to me, is not in tandem with what is in the manifesto. I think manifestos are for the smart guys who are able to read, for people who can spend their time to analyze the two documents, and those are very few percentage of this population in this country. And I will say this, as you go on the campaign trail, there is no much time to delve into the manifesto, whether it is Jubilee or NASA. In fact, they look at the crowd and they think of what will be good for that crowd to make them happy and to make them yell and to support them, and they do not have time to say this and this is what we are going to do and this is how we are going to do it. If you look at this campaign critically, it is a narrative of those cannot be leaders and they cannot be the president of this country. We've been in the system, and if we made it while we were outside and they were inside, how will they be able to take us outside, outside from where we are today? It is a narrative of, if President Uhuru is good to Kalonzo, then please give it to President Uhuru. Me, I seem to be having a problem with Kalonzo, and for that reason, let's wait until 2022. When he's going that direction, he's not telling you exactly what they want to do as the government. And if you hear, a lot of it is about a rebuttal of what the other team said and what we want to do, but not consistently saying, this is what we want to do. I've heard and I've read.
Do you think that's strategy or error?
I think it is an error, because people really want to know what the manifesto is telling us, so that we can hold these two gentlemen accountable to what they said for the next 5 years. But they're not really delving into this, and that is my worry. My worry is we are getting to a campaign where it is so personal. If you go to a campaign and you don't hear mtu wa kitandawili, then the campaign was not even there, because they want to hear the crowd cheering and saying, yes, we know whom you're referring to. So I think it is high time this presidential candidate rain on their people and the people that are talking on their podium and say, look, I might not be able to speak about all these things, but will you please highlight on some of the things that are in our manifesto, so that people are able to learn what is in our manifesto. Remember that I come from a community that will say, once Raila has read it, he's read it for us, so we don't have to read it again. And I believe there are people in Central Province that will say, once Uhuru has read it and once William Ruto has read it, we've already read the document. So are we taking this country to a point where we'll be able to hold these leaders accountable to what they've said, or we are just going with rhetorics and the crowd and charging them up? Tell me, what time does Uhuru Kenyatta get to explain to people about the manifesto of Jubilee when he's on top of a vehicle and saying 2 or 3 words, and he has to do 3 up to 7 and sometimes 8 rallies in a day. We have no such time. So I think perhaps the media need to start interrogating these people on TV and on print so that people can start reading bit by bit on the differences, on the issues that are in this manifesto. As far as I'm concerned, and they are not much difference. In fact, they are all embedded in Vision 2030. And so all these people are trying to say, well, we want to do this now, but the other guy is saying, we want to do this a few months away.
All right. Mark, because really your background is communication strategy, I believe, for political camps. We're just about a month away to the election. Is it time to talk the manifesto, or strategically is it time to, you know, customize the message per region? You know, first and foremost is I think Kenya has only ever had one successful manifesto, and that manifesto had a chant. It was called Yote Yawezekana Bila Moi. You remember that? Yes, right. That was the first time where Kenya was united behind a particular movement that wanted to achieve something, okay? The rest of the time what we've done is we've come up with the documents, and these documents have failed in translation. Now, what is the translation that I'm talking about? In communication, especially political communication, if your message cannot be emotional, you've not communicated. That's the problem that both of these manifestos are having. Jubilee's manifesto is very fact-heavy, we will keep on doing the same thing, very stable. NASA's manifesto is promising, but it does not have that emotional punch. There's nothing really in the NASA manifesto that makes their supporters wake up and say, yay, I really want this thing. And that is what is missing in both manifestos. And that is where you get into the problem where when you're going to a crowd and you want to tell them facts and figures in the case of Jubilee, then you lose the crowd. So you have to go the Vitendawili route because you've got to create an enemy. And then for NASA, because the manifesto is again embedded in 2030 and it's not much different from what Jubilee is offering, then you've got to offer yourself as an option to these other bad guys. So what needs to happen pretty quickly in this election from a communication standpoint is there needs to be emotions put back into these manifestos, emotions put back into what Jubilee has done. I'll give you an example, and yesterday I got pictures of kids using the tablets from Jubilee, and they're amazing pictures. You know, they're very emotional, but they're not being used. You just have figures. We have ordered 1 million tablets, but that does not hit me emotionally. I want to see that kid who has that tablet. Number two, on the NASA side, I can't even imagine what is this Kenya they're offering me that is so different from Jubilee. They're basically offering me the same thing but with a different face. And in such a scenario, the disadvantage is NASA's, because if I cannot imagine an option, then I will stay with the one that I know. And, do you think that will change though when we start seeing, you know, the TV adverts roll out? Yeah, it may change.
And Mark, for sure, manifestos cannot be emotional documents.
Can I qualify my statement?
Yeah, you can.
Let me tell you how manifestos can be emotional. Yeah. One of the dumbest ideas of the Trump manifesto was the border wall. Okay, it is uneconomical, it is impractical, it assumes there are no aeroplanes in the sky, it assumes there is no other way of crossing the border. It's a very stupid idea. But on that basis, on the fact that he emotionalized the immigrant issue, he emotionalized how many Mexicans are coming into the country, he was able to win the emotions of the American people, and that's why they voted illogically for him. Why? Because as far as emotions are concerned, emotions beat logic all the time. So in as much as you have your manifesto based in logic, its communications must always be based on emotion, and this is where he lost it.
But Mark, you see what happened about Trump. Trump radicalized himself around his personality, and you realize that even in terms of his delivery and him anchoring his speech and oratory content, that's actually what brought brought all these things together. I think after Michael becoming mischievous, and he was a little bit on point after. In terms of
really gone ham on you today.
In terms of what is happening is what both formations are doing, apart from their manifestos, and we know in terms of the literacy levels in this country, we know the percentage that can read documents. There will not be the majority of the crowds that we have, and we have not reached at that point whereby, where will a Mamamboga load a PDF document and begin to read page 1 to 72? It will not happen. So at the end of the day, the alternative then is these presidential candidates then dissipating and cascading this information in a very simplified level of addressing. And I think what has been happening in this campaign, is you look at where I agree with Mike, is they have identified every area has got a need. Every population has got a need. If you go to Western counties, they've got industries that have been collapsing. That's why when you see the president going there, he will not go so much into the book theories of what they are going to do, but he goes in terms of how do you improve livelihoods, and the messages become very direct. And again, lastly, we look at the nature of the campaign, and you have almost 10 stopovers in a day.
Right.
So you will really go directly to what these people want to hear, and that's what actually is happening. But if they can make it so simple to a Mamamboga and a boda person to a point whereby they believe that this person's image conveys this to us, then that's what locks our votes, but not talking about how they're going to be reading emotional manifestos.
And yet I seem to see some traction with the fact that you do need to be able to capture the imagination. I think we'd all agree. You need to capture the imagination of the public, and Mark's assessment is that it will be harder for NASA because their ideas are not yet tested, but for Jubilee they can show you the picture of a child perhaps in a raggedy school uniform but holding a tablet, and create that sort of imagery. I wonder your thoughts in terms of how NASA can capture the imagination of the public in terms of what they're promising on paper.
I think, and one of the things that, of course, you have seen, and NASA has really been able to maximize on it, is to ensure that the campaign strategy and communication is around certain emotive issues. Again, I would say, if you look at the campaign agenda that NASA has propagated, it has mainly been on the issue of cost of food. But again, if you look at the manifesto, you will not see very clear, ways of handling and tackling the issue of the cost of living. And then you look at the issue of IEBC in terms of how they have failed to prepare for the election. Never mind, a lot has been put in place, especially based on the demands that have come from NASA over the years. And again, you see, that is the area they would want to revolve around. The issue of corruption, again, that's another issue that they would also want to again put as a major campaign agenda. Now, and I think your question was right. How then are we seeing these issues then captured in the manifesto, and also how are we seeing these issues being articulated as per the manifesto? And the answer is the political parties will not want to dwell so much in the manifesto once again to do their campaign strategy and communicate to the public, because they understand the public will not, of course, be able to get in the manifesto issues, especially where there are hard facts and serious issues that they will be talking about. They want more of the emotive issues on the campaign trail, and issues that are going to be taken up by the voters very easily.
I don't know about that, John. I don't know that the public does not understand, because take for instance what Jubilee promised in the last election. Has the public not consistently held Jubilee accountable in terms of the deliverables? It's the public that called Jubilee out on where are our laptops,
Indeed.
More than a year after they had been promised.
Indeed, manifestos are very important, by the way, and no one should actually undermine the power of these manifestos. And the first time we got, of course, the issue of manifesto was in 2002. And of course, I would disagree with Mike that the manifesto that the Wananchi agreed with was a song, of course, that was being done at that time. I would think the manifesto so much, if you look at what was promised at that time, it was free primary education. And I think that's the first time Kenyans actually realized that political parties can have a serious impact in if they took government, depending on the issues that they promised. Because remember, when Kibaki came into government, they were able to implement free primary education. Look at again at...
So you think the public voted for free primary education and not to remove the incumbent?
Not really. The public voted to remove Moi, that is for sure. But now, you see, manifesto came actually to be implemented, and there must be a balance. But politicians understand very well. For now, they are looking for votes. And that's why you see the issue of manifesto is coming at the tail end. You know, we should have manifestos launched as early this year, but at that time, we were still trying to craft alliances and coalitions that are going to help us to reach tribal groupings and ethnic regions, blocks, because politicians in Kenya understand that people will vote definitely more, not on issues, not more on manifesto, but they will vote more on where they come from and where they feel close to. And that's why you see most of the politicians are trying to reach out to people from certain groupings in different ethnic blocks. So then we kind of would want to relegate the issue of manifestos. But manifestos are very important, because then we have seen media and even the public consistently asking questions as to what was promised and what was delivered and what has not been delivered. And that is why you see, as Jubilee was doing their manifesto launch, one of the things they had actually to explain very clearly is what were we able to achieve and what were we not able to achieve. Of course, the deputy president found himself trying to now to explain so much about how they plan to achieve on the issue of the stadia that they have not been able to build. So it is the issue of how are we going to reach these ethnic groups to add more votes into our basket, then the manifesto comes later.
Yeah,
I think that's how they approach it.
All right, and just to basically wind up on this topic, then perhaps it may be strategy, you know, knowing very well that the public are going to hold you accountable on this document, then it may, for the uncanny politician, be smart not to talk too much about the document.
Indeed.
Lest you are elected, and in 100 days, here's Anki Guta asking you what you've done. All right, so let's leave that topic there for now, and I thank you all for your views. We're taking a short break, but when we return, we're talking about the institutions that will determine the credibility of this election. Who should you be watching, and what should you be watching for? We're talking after the break. Stay with us.